Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Miles Kessler, and I'm happy to be here again with my good friend, dear teacher, mentor, spiritual sister,
Partner in crime.
Partner in crime, yeah, fellow conflict initiator,
Yeah. Troublemaker.
troublemaker. There we go. Diane Musho, Hamilton Sensei. How you doing, Diane?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. This is our 3-call series that we put together called Dharma and the Evolution of Conflict. These 3 calls are basically kind of a warm-up, a teaser. Also a way for you and I to kind of practice a little bit together before the 5-day retreat that we have coming up next month in Torry, Utah.
Yeah.
And we'll mention a little bit about that at the end of the call. Well, just to give you a little bit of an overview today, Diane and I are going to kind of just open up the topic. Today's topic, the first 2 calls was Dharma is your true nature. The second call was our evolutionary potential. And today's call is embracing conflict as path. And Diane and I will speak a little bit about that. Then we'll open up some space for some questions and answers. And then we'll probably give you guys a chance to do a breakout session, a little bit of practice time with the community members. And then we'll come back and finish off with some Q&A. It's going to go for 1 hour today, but I will, for those who feel like sticking around after the hour to do a little small cohort breakout groups, feel free. I'll open that up. So just to know that if it feels like it went fast, you can stick around and converse with other friends. Okay? Diane. Dharma and, no.
Miles.
Embracing conflict as path.
What do I have to say about that? Is that the question?
Yeah, I just kind of threw it out there.
Embrace is challenging.
That's the challenging part, yeah.
Yeah, embracing. So I was saying to Miles, I think part of the challenge is, the assumption is that learning how to include conflict and how to transmute it in our lives is actually the state of true harmony. That we have a somewhat idealistic, and you might say even naive perspective, that somehow we can either avoid conflict or be beyond conflict or be above conflict or be beside conflict, but not have to engage it directly. And part of the problem to really learning how to embrace and include it in a way that creates potential to transform it, if you will, is that we have to recognize that for the most part, unless you're trained, unless you really worked at it, that when we engage a conflict, and it's different in the Aikido studio when you're practicing it, but I'll ask Miles whether this is always the case. But in the in our family settings or relationships or work settings, usually when we encounter a conflict, there is a moment at which our fight or flight system starts to react. And it's interesting because you would think that we wouldn't feel threatened when our work is criticized or when someone gives us some negative feedback or when our sister tells us we're too bossy or who knows, you name it. But there's a funny way that even those kinds of assertions will create a response in the amygdala, in our signaling system, and automatically the sympathetic nervous system will start to drip cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine into our system, and those chemicals are designed for us to react. And so for the most part, unless you're in a highly focused situation, adrenaline and cortisol in the body are experienced as unpleasant. Yeah. And because they're unpleasant, the way we interpret our experience of conflict is that it's wrong or it's bad. It just simply doesn't feel good. That usually the experience of the nervous system firing in that way, that particular palette of stress hormones, the response is, this is wrong. Yeah. And that's actually evolutionarily appropriate because we're supposed to get away. Yeah. We are supposed to avoid. So to learn how to embrace and work with conflict is tremendously counterintuitive from the mere perspective of our physiology. So I think that that's the first thing that we have to really start to acknowledge is that conflict by its nature, there is a response in the body that it's bad and it's wrong. Does that make sense, Miles?
Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like Diane and I we share a lot of stuff. We're both Dharma practitioners for some time, and we're both into the integral framework. And Diane's a mediator. For those of you that know Diane, she's a professional mediator and facilitator, and that's something that's always really blown me away and impressed me. I am an Aikido teacher, and even though mediation and Aikido are two different fields in a way, the principles of the two are very, very close. There's a lot of overlap. And the main thing with Aikido, it's a Japanese martial art, Japanese term. It's the only 100% life affirming martial art. So it's not zero sum, which I'll say something about in a moment. But it means the way of harmonizing life energy that, boundaries come along, they're floating out there in the universe, and then boom, they hit each other and they create stress and conflict. The amygdala gets triggered and fired and all the hormones fly, and it feels highly unpleasant, like Diane said, and you just want to either get out or control, or we're off to the races. Aikido is the way of harmony with all that energy, but it's actually not about harmony. And that's why I love what Diane said at the beginning. Aikido is not about harmony. Aikido is a name for the process that happens in the middle of conflict, the process that leads towards wholeness. That conflict is like an intensification of separation.
Yeah, right.
And wholeness is where the universe wants to go. I guess we could say wholeness is where Dharma wants to go. Wholeness is where evolution wants to go. And that process of moving into wholeness, we could say, is Aikido. And therefore Aikido it happens in the field of conflict. The byproduct, or the result, if things go well, the byproduct is harmony. But there's all these beautiful teachings and trainings to teach us how to hold center, give space for this moment where the amygdala is just like fired and all the bells and whistles are going off. And, it's like a wave of hormones or emotions or reactions or feeling that comes up, and it will overwhelm. It often does overwhelm. And if we have enough, that's why Dharma was our first call. If we have enough capacity to contain that, then it will also subside with time. With practice, that can actually, you can ride the wave up and ride the wave down. And then you stay in a place of choice. And the choice is critical, to actually have that enough space of awareness to be able to choose how to work with the conflict is key. So that's kind of where I'll start, Diane.
Yeah, so keeping in mind that reality is, I think we said this on the first call, reality itself, we're always one with everything, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily perceive oneness. We might be perceiving two-ness. And I like what Miles said, that conflict is exaggerated two-ness. It's exaggerated separation, and separation by its nature feels stressful. On the other hand, separation is also the place in which we can have creativity. So conflict is also the possibility. It gives us creative possibility. There's creative potential for how it is that we work with or return to the perception of wholeness. A conflict, we can't have a conflict if we're not connected. That's one of the things about conflict, is that it's intimate. It's like you're always involved with someone that you're fighting with. You're not dispassionate, or there wouldn't be a conflict. So it's both creative potential, it's also intimacy, and there's also tremendous energy. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to learn to work with conflict, is there's this latent energy that we get to work with. So when Miles talks about the way of harmonizing life energy, how do we take the energy that's available to the conflict and actually use it in the service of our creativity and in the service of intimacy? But like I will sometimes say in my courses, and keep in mind that Miles is working in an Aikido context, and I'm working in mediation. So people are often sitting at tables or trying to have discussions or having conversations about things like race or gender, or those kinds of things. And there's a tremendous amount of energy that gets generated. There's nothing more enlivening that will bring people into the moment more fully than when two people start to fight. So people get interested, they get present, they start paying attention, Like all of a sudden, if Miles and I start arguing with each other, nobody's going to be drifting anymore, right? So there's also this kind of pull into the present that conflict offers us. So there's all this potential of conflict, and yet because it feels bad in the body, we tend to move away from it. One of the things that we'll explore, and that I'll just mention right now, is that we do have habituated conflict styles, and that the 3 most common styles correspond to the 3 poisons in Buddhism. So the first style is an avoidance style. It just simply, when a conflict arises, you kind of have disappearing powers. Even if you're sitting at a table in a meeting and a conflict comes up for whatever reason, you just kind of put on the invisibility cloak and disappear. Do any of you recognize that style? Linda's got her hand up. Kathy's got her hand up. Yeah, so it's just like, boom, I'm gone. And so none of these styles are bad. What is difficult is when we just simply habitually go to one style. So in its transmuted form, to simply allow a conflict to pass through without getting identified to it can be really skillful in any one moment. But when you habitually avoid a conflict, what happens is that people kind of start to disappear you a little bit. They won't count on you to speak your truth. They won't look to you to help solve a problem. You're in danger of losing some respect. You might be in danger of actually getting depressed a little bit because you're always moving away from what's happening. So we want to explore that style of avoidance, both its wisdom and the problem of it. And what we'd like to do is help you to expand so that you have options. You're not just responding in one way.
Right.
The second style is the one that most people see themselves as being, at least in the classes I've been teaching.
Is that right? That's interesting.
Yeah. When I poll people and say, which of these do you identify with the most? The style people identify with the most is an accommodating style.
And I
And
thought it was going to be the other one.
avoidance? No.
No, aggression.
No. People identify at the very least with aggression, at least.
You should do more workshops here in Israel.
That's probably true. Or New York City.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. People, I would say that when I used to teach at the university and I would teach freshmen, we did a conflict class for freshmen, and I would say 60 to 65% of freshmen felt themselves to be too accommodating.
And how cultural is that? I'm just curious. How much of that is attributed, because there's a type, but there's also the cultural kind of agreed upon way to be.
Yeah, I think that culture has a tremendous amount of a role to play. I mean, in some, as we know, certain cultures people are going to clam up, and certain cultures people are going to speak up, and they're going to be willing to fight more. And totally. Yeah. So the accommodating style corresponds in Buddhism to what we call grasping or clinging. So what's the difference between avoidance and accommodation, everybody? In avoidance, you simply disappear. In accommodation, you work really hard to maintain the relationship, even when you shouldn't. Does that make sense? So accommodating, you become pleasing, you become adaptive, you want to make sure that you're still liked, you want to make sure the boss is still happy with you. And that's a different style than simply disappearing or avoiding it. Does everybody see that difference? So in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about avoidance equates to ignorance, just simply ignoring situations. Accommodation equates to grasping or clinging, because we're trying to hold on to something. The accommodation is coming out of a desire to remain, not to be seen in a certain way. Does that make sense? To remain in people's favor. Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, we're all accommodating. Let's just face it. I mean, human beings, E.L. Wilson says that we're like, next to ants, termites, and bees, we're eusocial, meaning we're the most highly social species on the planet. If you look at our cities that we're living in right now, I mean, I don't know what Sao Paulo is or Mexico City today, but I mean, they're up around 20 million people. That's a lot of people. I think 26 in some places now. So people are doing a lot of accommodating. We're doing a lot of ignoring. And in some ways, the aggressive style gets the most play because it's the most exciting. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So, we enjoy, President Trump gets more media attention than Obama because he's creating more strife, there's more struggle, there's more challenge, there's more fighting going on. So
but
therefore
it takes up more space, you know, the
it
aggressive,
takes up more space.
it's like, let's push and make some space here.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody needs to recognize that there's a good amount of your day where you listen instead of talk, where you do something that you'd rather not, where you let somebody cut you off in traffic, where you stand in a line longer when somebody cuts in. We all accommodate. That's just simply part of who we are. And then the final style is the aggressive style, like that Miles has been talking about, which is basically when you feel the sensations of fight or flight, you're like, really? Oh yeah? Are you sure? I try to be accommodating, but within minutes I'm aggressive. So, and then there's of course this hybrid that we all know, the passive aggressive style. And those people are generally really good at looking accommodating, but underneath there's a lot of revenge and payback going on. So, so those are basically the 4 styles. And it's important if we relate to conflict as path that we get really familiar with our style. So
well,
go ahead, Miles.
I just want to ask you a quick question and
Sure.
and then, because you know, I know my type pretty much. Yeah. But I also recognize that it's situational. So I'm just curious, what do you think? Because you know, I'm going to default to my type, and yet the situations it's different in situations. Can you say something about that? Depending on the situation, it might change type.
And it sometimes will be like, so for instance, everybody maybe we could just do a quick survey. You know, who in your life are you most likely to fight with, and who in your life are you most likely to avoid fighting with? Now, for some people, the people they fight with are the people they're most intimate with. And the people they won't fight with are the people that they're more distant from. And for other people, it's exactly the opposite. So do you want to survey people a little bit and see?
Well, how about this, Diane? Because this is such a cool piece, and we can make this. Why don't we put them in breakout rooms for 5 minutes?
Okay.
And let them, you know, what do you think your type is? And then what was the second part of this question that you just asked?
How does it vary? You know, so in what situations are you avoidant, and what situations are you more likely to be confrontive? You know, let's just kind of do a self-evaluation. What do you notice about your own style?
3 types again?
And what context? So there are really 4, honestly.
Okay.
There is the avoidant style, the accommodating style, the aggressive style, or the confrontational style, or competitive. And then there's this hybrid where you appear accommodating, but you're actually competitive underneath, or you're basically involved in paybacks. Yeah.
Great. And then how does that play out in your life?
And how does it play out? And is there a way you can we can ask this when you get back, but how can you become more flexible? Awesome. That's really what we want to do.
Great. So just 5 minutes for this one. So don't spend too much time chit-chatting, go into it. And then if you got time at the end, you guys can share. Okay. See you guys in 5 minutes.
Bye, everybody.
Great. So everybody's back. Welcome. I hope your breakout session went well. If we can see, let's see 2 or 3 hands if somebody would be willing to share, especially if this exercise surprised you in some way, if you learned something, you know, interesting about yourself or from hearing other people. I don't know if you know how to raise your hand. If you do it, there's an electronic, if you go to the bottom of your window, there's a participants button. Click that and you'll see a window on your side. Nina, your mic is open.
Hi, Diane. Hi, Miles.
Hey, Nina.
Hi. Yeah, same here. So liberation and being flexible with styles, or beginning to be flexible with styles, was one of the things that we talked about. And I think one thing that was really new for me in my own exploration of myself was that I'm noticing my first physical reaction is avoidance. And then I'm also I can fight a lot then, but so I needed to get liberated from being frozen physically. And I'm really curious, and as in there's a piece of being almost like allowed to, you know, and it's probably very young, this part of me, but how style can also be just so deeply formed by our experience, of course, not only by our nature and temperament, but also by experience. I'm I'm curious if any of you had reflections around that at some point during the call today. So thank you.
I'll say one thing, just that in my small group, if it's okay, well, I need to ask if I can share a little bit. A woman who shared just that her circumstances in life had changed, and as her circumstances changed, her style changed. So that it was really directly born of an experience of suddenly not having the same kind of security she'd had earlier, and then watching how it shifted her way of being. So, yeah. Are there other people that want to comment on that?
There are. Yeah, let's go to Kathy. Kathy Murty, your mic's open.
And I'm not commenting on that last one. I was just going to report out from our small group that one of the people had a distinction between confrontation and engagement. And that they often attempt to engage, and if they're not successful, then they'll confront or be passive aggressive. No, I just thought that was an interesting distinction.
Yeah, beautiful. Great. Thank you, Kathy. And we'll
So Miles, I think your mic is muted.
How did that happen? I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So we'll do one more and then we'll move on with the call. Eric Drake, your mic is open. I think it's, yeah.
Oh, yep. You can hear me great. Actually, this relates to the first part of this conversation you're talking about. I'd noticed that, my conflict style was basically accommodating for the most part across the board when I was younger. And as time goes on, I've discovered that the expectations of the results actually has been changing how I relate to those situations. In the beginning, I originally kind of I felt like, if I'm accommodating enough, then the result will be positive for me. But as time wore on and those results were almost never positive, I find that my reaction becomes more aggressive and more conflict oriented as a result of that. Because that seems to be the only way I get any positive result that I'm looking for. So that was just my thought.
Great. So Diane, is that good? Can we move forward a little bit, and then I think if we do, we'll have a chance to do another practice session.
Okay, that's fine. Sure.
And basically, so everything that was said, it was really great, and it's. Especially what I'm sorry, I forgot the woman's name who was on first with the iPhone. I just remember it was
Nina.
Nina, right? Sorry. Yeah, you could tell that as Nina was speaking that it's so emotional, it's so close. When we really start to kind of feel into our styles and feel into possible situations, it in a way, even just thinking about it triggers what Diane was saying before about the amygdala starts to feel it, and we start to kind of, and that unpleasant feeling. Forgive me, Nina, I'm not saying that you were having an unpleasant feeling, but it's what it reminded in me. That unpleasant feeling is what really kind of throws us into our style. And it's simply a coping strategy, an ego strategy that we've developed over time, personally, through family, through culture, whatever. And it's very important when we're working with embracing conflict as path that we do practices like this to adjust our attitude or our relationship to not just conflict, but how it makes us feel. And one of the things that I was mentioned before about Aikido is that it's a zero-sum. It's a non-zero sum martial art. And each one of these conflict styles, when it's not conscious, they're zero sum. And this is what the ego does. This is the strategy that it's developed. This is what it does, and it's always zero sum. So if we have a conflict,
meaning it's fundamentally competitive, and there's a winner and a loser. Is that? And
fair? There's a winner and a loser. So there's me and there's Diane, and the wholeness of us equals 100%. And then suddenly we disagree, and then we kind of fight over that. Who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong in that 100%? Mm-hmm. And zero sum, winner gets 100% of it, loser gets 0%. I'm satisfied, but she's not. Problematic. And if I'm a little bit conscientious.
You're satisfied with being a loser, Miles?
No, I had the 100%. You lost. You lost.
Notice how I assumed I was a loser. How did that happen?
Okay, for the sake of the argument, Diane wins.
I'm not competitive.
So that's the zero sum. Now that's kind of, that's human history. That's the perpetuation of the same thing for hundreds of thousands of years, and all conflicts are perpetual in that way. A move up from that is actually agreeing to disagree. It's like, okay, I'm not going to dominate and win everything. I'm going to take my 50% of my perspective and go over here. Diane's going to take her 50%. We go over there, and she's going to go over there, far over there, hopefully, like way over there, further. She's in Utah.
Stay in Tel Aviv, and I'll stay in the States.
It's still not far enough, Diane.
Yeah.
So we can agree to disagree, which is definitely better than, winning or losing. But it's still 50% and 50%. So I'm 50% satisfied, but I'm not completely satisfied. So it leaves you wanting. And, the resolution of conflict, like we're trying to find in Aikido, like Diane's doing in her work, is where we actually resolve the conflict by keeping the best of both perspectives and evolving to a new whole. And then I'm 100% satisfied that I didn't have to really kind of give up anything to be who I am, and I didn't demand that Diane give up anything to be who. We included the best. We didn't lose anything, and there's a beautiful resolution. And it doesn't equal 100% anymore. It's, what do you say? What's the word? It's exponential. The satisfaction is exponential. It's 1,000,000% at that point. You know what I mean, Diane?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, there's a a negotiation book that I refer to in both of my books. It was written by Roger Fisher and William Ury, and they coined the term win-win.
Right.
And so the idea is that not only is there a win-win, that by engaging the conflict that you actually add value. So that's another way to say it, is that when we bring everything to the table and we actually engage it, that there's an opportunity for more creativity, as I said before, more intimacy, energy. So there's value that genuinely gets created by engaging the conflict.
Right. And going back to the point I was making, how we relate to the very process of conflict itself it's crucial for us to move into that win-win space. I think it was Hegel that said that truth is nothing more than the moving dialectic, the dialectic when you take opposing things, and how does that organize into a greater understanding, a greater whole. And that movement is the process, and that process is Aikido. That process is mediation, I believe, and that process is definitely evolutionary.
It's also a relationship. It's just always there.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what I thought I would coming from there in a way, Diane was talking about these kind of different conflict styles. Is that what you call them, Diane? Conflict styles. Yeah. So we can also compare that a little bit in a slightly different way to fight, flight, freeze. When we're really kind of survival instinct, and there's fight, and there's freeze. The ego can only do, in a real conflict, the ego can only fight. The ego can only flee, excuse me. The ego can only freeze. And another way to look at that, Diane already kind of mentioned it, was aggression, aggressive, passive, or passive, aggressive. And the ego only can be aggressive in a conflict, or it can only be passive, like disappear, or it can only be passive, aggressive. And then those are kind of three. There's like 3, 4. There's very few options outside of that in terms of protecting my ego boundaries. So there's this beautiful practice that we do in Aikido called the Aikido koan, where we basically say, I'm not passive, in the middle of a conflict. So, in Aikido, we're doing this physical practice. We're all having a good time together. It's nice. We come together and we kind of role play, somebody attacking, and you have these beautiful techniques that, that you work with. But then, the one of the exercises that, you kind of repeat a mantra to yourself: I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, and I'm not passive aggressive. And then the person attacks you. And as the person attacks you, very controlled, kind of, according to your level, as the person attacks you, you're meant to do a freestyle response in a way that's not zero sum, that doesn't dominate or run away, but resolves it, in beautiful ways. I have to Maybe you've seen Aikido. But I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, I'm not passive aggressive. And then the question comes up, who am I? So we cancel out with a mantra, I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, I'm not passive aggressive. Who am I? And then they come. So it's an embodied koan in a way. And then you respond, and you notice right away that your urge is to respond aggressively, or your urge is to respond passively, or your urge is to respond passive aggressively. But as you negate those with your koan, you're left in this space of openness, and where the ego suddenly can relax or collapse or negate. And then you discover there's ways of being, that there's an energy in that conflict there's an energy that wants to go in a certain direction. And following that direction is the process. Following that direction is Aikido. So I thought maybe we could do another little breakout based on this kind of Aikido koan. I'm not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. But in order to do this first, I'd like to ask everybody to kind of, we spoke about our conflict styles before. Maybe you can think of one situation or one relationship or repeating situation in your life that is returning to conflict right now. In fact, maybe it already happened, you already thought about it, pick one. My wife and I have arguments, or somebody cuts in front of me and line at the market, and whatever it is. And then what is your style there? Are you the accommodating style? Are you the avoiding style? Are you the aggressive style? And then kind of take a moment and just kind of now settle into the koan. I'm not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. And really just kind of breathe that in. That already kind of, if we're in a nice, comfortable space here, that'll already relax the ego. I'm not passive. I'm not aggressive. I'm not passive aggressive. And then once again, kind of bring that conflict into your mind. And from I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, I'm not passive aggressive, who am I? Just notice the energy that comes up. Just notice any thoughts that come. Just notice any intentions that arise from the who am I. It's like you open up your mind and your space to a giant valley or an abyss that's not passive, that's not aggressive, that's not passive aggressive. And you whisper into that abyss, who am I? And just like a mountain echo, something will return. Just kind of hold that for a moment. It may be crystal clear, it may be a feeling, it may be a vibration, it may be continued emptiness. Totally cool. But even though we're kind of sitting in a nice space here in a beautiful kind of zazoom room, where it's all cool, if you just think about the conflict, if you like kind of energetically connect with it, and then I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, I'm not passive aggressive, who am I? What is the answer that comes up? Okay, and if you had your eyes closed, open your eyes. And let's go ahead and do another breakout for about 5 minutes. Considering what answers came up for you. And again, share if nothing came up for you. This is a really short and quick practice. But if nothing came up for you, just speak about the passive aggressive, the passive, the aggressive, or the passive aggressive tendencies. Okay? Okay, everybody. 5 minutes to share. Okay, everybody is back. Welcome back to the main room, everybody. How was your breakout session? I hope that exercise went well for you. Let me open up Diane's mic. Okay, great. So listen, we only have about 6 minutes left, and we need to make a little bit a quick announcement about this upcoming retreat. that we're going to have soon. So maybe just as a wrap up for this exercise, this is not meant to kind of go, to go into your meditative place, although the meditative place is a great place to kind of rebalance. It's really meant to kind of like, in a way, close the normal channels of reacting towards conflict, and then see what that does to you. Yeah. And if you've got enough capacity to contain what's happening in you and stay in relationship, and stay in relationship, that's really the key. Then that kinetic energy between you and your boundary and the other boundary will start to take a direction, and aligning with that, in just a principles way, aligning with that is the resolution. In methodologies, there's so many great methodologies that actually do that process. Aikido is one, mediation is another. So I encourage you to reflect on that. We're going to make a quick announcement about the upcoming retreat in July, but just before we do that, I want to invite people, if you want to stick around, you'll get a chance to go back into groups, like cohort groups, the same groups basically, and chat for another half hour. We'll leave the room open for you guys. So Diane, we have a retreat coming up.
Yeah, we have a retreat coming up in Torry, and the dates are July. Julia, help me out. What are the exact dates?
11 to 15.
11 to 15. I need to get those down, so I'm sure to be there. So I think, let me turn it over to Julie. We have a couple of days left for the early bird registration. Do you want to just remind people how they can sign up if they're interested? Julie?
Sure. I'll put a link in the frame here, but it's also on Miles' website. It is the title of the program is Dharma and the Evolution of Conflict, and we'll be meeting in Torry, Utah, which is a beautiful red rock country of southern Utah. For those of you who may never have been there, it's really quite an exquisite and beautiful place. The program registration is open. We have a few spaces left, not a lot. There is an early registration discount of $50. It's available until the end of the day, midnight Mountain Time on June the 7th. So you've got 2 more days to register and get that early registration pricing. Okay.
Great, thank you, Julia. And just from my side, it's for me, it's gonna be. I don't get to see Diane enough these days, and it's going to be wonderful to be holding that teaching space with her. And it's going to be Dharma and the Evolution of Conflict. It's going to be a lot of Dharma. Some of it, who knows if we'll evolve? I don't know. There's sure to be conflict with Diane and I, but there's going to be beautiful people, beautiful place, beautiful center, beautiful staff, beautiful food. We'd love to have you come in and join us, right, Diane?
Yeah, and a chance to practice and make mistakes and practice again and open up your style and try other things. And I think the exercise of I'm not passive, I'm not aggressive, I'm not passive aggressive. It's like the question of, well, then who am I in this moment, and what possibilities are there for me, and how can I respond, is a question that we'll be holding for the whole week. And there's nothing better than practicing with people who are interested in developing the same skill. And one of the things that, our work with Ken Wilber and with an evolutionary perspective is that we literally are changing the way human beings deal with conflict. We're doing it not just for ourselves, but on behalf of the whole. Because the better we get at it, the more it opens up the grooves for other people to do the same thing. And let's face it, as he says, up from Eden, it's a long ways up from, being just a primate in the wild. And so it's something that we really need to learn how to do. So I really hope you'll join us.
Yeah, God knows we need to learn how to do it.
Yeah, we sure do.
Right, so thank you to everybody who joined today's call and the previous 2 calls. There'll be some more in the future, but that's going to be it for this round. Thank you to you all. Thanks to Julia for hanging out, supporting them with the retreat, and my deep thanks to Diane, as always.
Thanks, everybody. See you later. Bye. Hope we can practice together. Bye.